Oh, you hanging out right? Oh, you hanging out right? Hanging out right? Oh, you hanging out right?
Hello, welcome back to Ask Reverend Intensive. I'm Chuck Rainey.
I'm John Anthony Martinez.
And we have a question here from Matthew in San Francisco. And Matthew is asking, should he learn how to read music? John, I have a lot to say about that. What would you have to say about that?
Oh, wow. Well, got a couple of things to say about that. I remember an old trumpet teacher of mine saying that the world's worst pencil and paper is better than the world's greatest memory. What he meant by that was, if I could write down an idea, now I don't have to bother trying to remember it. So if I could write it down and then come back years later and I can recall what it was I thought about and complete something or put it aside. It's kind of like wanting to learn any language. I mean, if I wanted to learn, English when as a kid, I can't imagine never wanting to learn how to read English. It kind of adds a whole lot more depth to your understanding of the language. You can communicate with other people on another level. I've heard the argument that I don't really want to learn how to read because it's going to mess up my creativity. I got my own style, I got my own voice, and reading is for suckers, or I ain't got time for that. I'm not planning to be a session musician, so why bother learning how to read? But what I find interesting is I learned how to read English, and I can read Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet. I can read William Shakespeare. But just because I can read William Shakespeare doesn't mean I'm going to write like William Shakespeare or speak like William Shakespeare. But I can appreciate what he does, right, or has written. And it'll bring a lot of depth to the way I communicate. So, of course, I say you should learn how to read. Absolutely, absolutely learn how to read. Especially if you plan to do this for a living and if you want people to take you seriously, or if nothing else, to open up more gig opportunities. Because most of the gigs I've done, I have to read. And I play with so many people, man, that I could not possibly remember all that music. There's just no way. I have to learn sometimes 40 to 100 songs a week at times. I can't remember all that stuff, man. So I chart it. And and some of us develop our own shorthand and secrets. But man, if it weren't for the public school system and being involved in orchestra and band, I don't know how I would have done it. But that's my short answer. What have you got to say about it?
Well, for me, in reading music, by the way, too, I'm an ex-trumpet player, baritone horn player, and of course those instruments had me involved in the orchestra, where I had to read, because, like, again, you can't expect the brass ensemble in a college, although we did memorize our performances in the brass ensemble. But again, if you know how to read, two things happen. You don't have to really recall or remember note progressions if you can just read them, if you're involved in that kind of music, which is film. Although I've done some films where I had a chord chart, but that is also reading. Notation is very difficult if you don't read notation all the time. It's like you can ride a bike, but you're a better bike rider if you ride all the time. Also, it depends on what your career is going to be like. I know a lot of musicians that don't read music that are very famous and very successful, but they play only their music, or they're so talented that they can hear, and they don't have to remember. Now, if if you're in a band, of course you don't read your band music. But if you're going to be a freelance musician, you got to learn how to read. It's very simple. And also, too, in reading, you only want to be as good of a reader as you read in an organized situation. Now, I'm not talking about reading at home. In organized situations with people, in impromptu situations, reading is very, very important. If you want to be a thorough musician, reading is a part of what you have to do. Now I'm saying first, before you learn how to read, some people learn how to read first, and then they learn how to play. I always say, bring something to the table first, play enough of your instrument, and then learn how to read.
Right.
But that's the way I came about it.
And I think that makes sense because that's how you learn as a child. You don't learn reading and then learn how to speak English. You learn by imitating the environment. You listen, you're using your hearing, you hear people talking around you, you start to put together that the words they're using represent the things around you.
Even like a child.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like a baby's go, oh, okay, when I say mama, I see this lady show up and I get fed. Oh, I get it, you know. So you start to put together, the words have meaning. I got it. So the same goes with music. Music has meaning. But you start first communicating. Then once you have a kind of a little bit of a grasp of what's happening, then they can start putting a letter in front of you because now it means something. The letter A sounds like this.
Now in clinic, John and I do talk about this more in depth.
Yes.
And when we're doing master classes, we talk about more about reading as opposed to improvising or just hearing.
Right.
Most musicians have good ears, or they should have good ears, but it's a matter of experience. So in clinic, we go a little bit further with this.
Absolutely. So it sounded like to me, though, that you were saying people like who were famous for not having learned to read. Two that came to mind famously. Buddy Rich did not read music.
Neither did Earl Garner.
Earl Garner, Dennis Chambers will admit, yeah, I don't know how to read music. But those guys are the exception,
Yeah.
not the rule. So we have to remember that. You know, so unless you're a Buddy Rich or a Dennis Chambers, highly recommend. And if you're a bass player, I'm going to do a cheap plug for this, but this is The Complete Electric Bass Player, Volume 1, Book 1 by Chuck Rainey, available on rhythmintensive.com or Amazon or anywhere else. But this is sort of like almost like the Bible for the learning to play the electric bass. So I want to highly recommend this is a great place to start if you're a bass player
And you want to learn how to
and
read.
you want to learn how to read. So, well, I hope we answered your question, Matthew. And don't forget, The Complete Electric Bass Player. We're Rhythm Intensive. If you have a question for us, please send it to ask@rhythmintensive.com, and we'll do our best to reply to you. And don't forget to subscribe.
Oh, you're hanging out right.